Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. KC Cares is the intersection of the nonprofit and profit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This KC Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing, Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. I'm Ruth Bombigas. Every nonprofit organization needs to fundraise to support its mission. Today, fundraising, the attainment of financial support for a charity, a cause, or an enterprise, is both art and science. No one knows that better than our Ask the Expert guest, Dr. Philanthropy, Jeffrey Byrne. Today, we're talking about the latest trends in fundraising, and Jeffrey is in the know. Jeffrey, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Ruth. It's good to be with you and to see you today.
It's great to see you. And I love the groovy glasses. Just a shout out there for those of us who wear glasses.
Yes, you have good taste.
I do. And especially because we have you. Okay, let's talk. We're in 2023. We've made it through the pandemic. We're officially done with it. So what is kind of going on in fundraising? What are the new things or maybe that we're coming back to again? I know one thing you wanted to talk about is DAFs. Donor advised funds. So what's going on with that?
Well, thanks for having me today, Ruth. I appreciate it. I think that there are the tried and true ideas in fundraising that have always been there. You can call someone up, you can write them a letter. Now you can zing them an email. You can use social media for campaigns. And you can do events, but everything still is, you got to ask someone to give normally. People do give without being asked, but if they're not asked the right way, they don't sometimes know how to give. So, and the amount to give, and you might be leaving money on the table. So, there are a number of tried and true projects and activities that will always be there. However, post-COVID, we see certain things coming back and a little bit of trends. I will get to DAFs and donor advised funds in a few minutes, but I'd rather give a general overview first, and then we can narrow down to a few specifics. I think that we definitely see that events are back in style. The event calendar this last fall was very full for nonprofits that wanted to go back into the fundraising arena to get people together, to showcase a project, to have a drink and food with their donors. And we saw within our clients and across the country through other organizations that I'm part of, that special events, either lunches or dinners, are back in play. Donors are wanting to go back out. Many donors, especially older donors who might have been a little cautious about COVID the last 3 years, they're wanting to go back out and they are wanting to participate. So that has been one area that we've just seen flourish this year.
So I have a question though about events. What changes have you seen, or are we just back to quote normal, whatever we used to do?
Yeah, well, I think some organizations are still using hybrid, both online and in person. I think, frankly, that's a mistake. I would not be recommending that because I think you have to choose one medium over the other. And if you're going to go full forward back in person, then you should really concentrate it and make it as advantageous for the donor and pleasurable for the donor. And you can't do both. I mean, you can't have a online and then in-person presentation. So I think that we see definitely people coming back into the room, enjoying that. We see also now that the spring is here and we're anticipating summer, that golf tournaments and outdoor activities are very much in play as well. And that's fun. So you can bring your children out, you can bring your family out, and you can have you can enjoy that more wholly with the people you care about. So I think number one, the special events have come back into play. I think other areas that we continue to see is how are you using social media to really promote your organization? And do you use social media like politicians to raise money in small amounts? We see politicians using Facebook and other types of media very effectively in distributing a message and asking for a gift. I don't think nonprofits have perfected that the way our polytricksters have. I say polytricksters, that's a term my mother would have used.
I love that.
And the politicians definitely know how to utilize and how to put together a call for action. I think that nonprofits have learned that and are learning that better. It's got to be short, sweet, direct, and you've got to make an offer. You've got to provide an offer. And you have to have then the platform available once they click through that link, that it automatically goes to a landing page and where they can easily fill out the donation and make it as seamless and as pleasurable as possible. Also, are you going to have recurring donations? Are they going to sign up at AutoSign? And most organizations forget to do that. And so auto renewal, or creating programs where you're doing a monthly donation is very important. So as you are setting that strategy up, you need to really think through the various links and the various offers that you're going to be making to your donors or to prospects out there in the world. We still see that major gifts are done by one-on-one solicitations. We're seeing that the economy is not really affecting donors and prospects. We're seeing very positive fundraising activities when our nonprofits are going out, they're doing respectful asks. They are then doing the type of follow-up to help close the gift. So, a lot of times the easiest activity is making the ask. That sometimes is the hardest activity for a development director to get out and do. But the donor, but the easiest is really, the hardest is when we made the ask to loop back around and to get the gift, close on the call. So we find that you still have to be creative and you have to spend some time doing that as well. We don't work with a lot of organizations who do direct mail or telemarketing any longer. So that's really a social media plan. But communications is very important, as you know, to underline and to continue to create a message and the brand and put out the brand that you are very interested in promoting. So communications, I really talk about versus direct mail or telemarketing or even newsletters. We see electronic newsletters today.
I have several questions. So communication is important. That hasn't gone away, but you did talk about new ways to communicate and using your social media. So looking at nonprofits, pre-COVID, I would say most played somehow in those social media, Facebook, Instagram, maybe even Twitter. There's even more out there. How important is it to have somebody on your fundraising team or your organization who really gets those mediums? I'm even thinking of TikTok and Snapchat for your potential younger donors.
Sure. I think it's a return on investment. Some organizations can spend, and directors of development or communication staff can spend an inordinate amount of time putting together a social media plan. Do you have the audience to fulfill the social media plan, or do you have the strategies developed so that you are targeting those strategies to create the audience to respond to social media? So as we advise nonprofits, we are very circumspect about, okay, what is your donor base? What is your prospect base? How are you going to expand that reach and that message to gather new donors in your efforts? Or are you really wasting your time doing that? Should you just have a minimal social media presence? Byrne, for instance, we have a social media presence that's really LinkedIn and some Facebook. We really use LinkedIn as our primary vehicle of mode of print of communication. Of course, we do a monthly newsletter, which we've done for 22 years, every month on spot. But we feel that, having a Facebook, Instagram, chit chat or TikTok, Snapchat, those are areas that really fall out of our expertise. We'd have to really have someone concentrating on that. And is that really a good return for investment for our organization? We would say no. Most of our clients don't have robust media operation or social media operations. If we work with national organizations, now they have the ability to do that because they have a much larger reach. They normally have larger staffs. They have bigger donor or databases or prospect bases. So I think that is very important. I'm not trying to negate using those. I'm just saying understand what the use is and are you going to really get a return on your investment?
Great advice. I would also add to that, and I think you've alluded to that, is know what your messaging is.
Yeah.
Don't just jump on a trend. As I was preparing for our conversation today, I know that with all these trends, there's still the need to make sure you know what your mission is and that you're informing or asking to support your mission.
Sure. I think there are opportunities to ask in a lot of different ways. Make sure that you strategically have put together a plan and you know how to then, I used to have a coach, a professional coach, and I would say, oh, we're going to execute that. She's like, Jeffrey, that is not a term you want to use, execution. You want to implement those plans. But know how to implement the plan and then have any follow-up strategies. And also, once you capture those new donors, what do you do with them? You have to have a plan to make sure that you are touching them on a regular basis so that they stay warm and close to your organization.
Has the number of suggested touches or communications changed post-COVID? And is there a magic number? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was thinking through that. I think that's a good question, Ruth. I would say, I've never had a rule of thumb that you have to thank someone or touch someone 13 times, or you have to do it every other month. I think it really is what's appropriate for your organization, what's appropriate for your donor base. How do you feel that the touches that you're going to make and how are your donors going to react to that? I know when 25 years ago, I did direct mail for the Visiting Nurse Association, and we probably sent out about 500,000 pieces of mail 4 times a year. We had a very active program, very mechanized. It was very automated, and we knew exactly donor retention, what we wanted as goals, and we knew what donor acquisition we wanted as well. So I think that now that direct mail is sort of passé for most organizations that we deal with, it's how are you going to put together strategies, and are they going to fulfill what you really need to raise in your for your organization?
Yes, and with the announcement of mail going up yet again, I know with the nonprofits I work with, it's always a conversation is, first of all, does anybody look at it? And second of all, is it worth the expenditure when there's so many ways you can communicate electronically that don't cost anywhere near what the U.S. Postal Service does? But I'm going off on a sidebar, and I didn't mean to do that. What else has made a shift, has changed, or is becoming new again? Old is new.
Yeah, I think that, one area you mentioned, donor advised funds, I would just mention a little, I would give a few tips to our audience and to our fellow professionals. Of course, you're going to do the same thing as in, you're going to write grants for foundations. You're going to make solicitation asks. You're going to work with your board on having them reach out to potential donors. You might do a special event. But, I think a lot of times we keep reading that donors or nonprofits are leaving money on the table when it relates to donor advised funds and donors who might have donor advised funds. So let's back up and talk a little bit about that and what a donor advised fund is. Donor advised funds are a vehicle that were created back in the 1990s to provide a donor an accessible way of giving dollars through a community foundation or now professional, commercial, financial institutions that the donor can create a fund. They can fund with a gift of cash, securities, or complicated assets like privately held stock or real estate. They can get a tax benefit, they can get a deduction, and then the donor advised fund then can provide charities through a donation to charities. About 6% of 6 to 8% of all donations. And all donations are about $500 billion in America, roughly in 2022 or 2021. We saw that about 6 to 8% of all donations were coming from donor advised funds. For instance, in Greater Kansas City, we have the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation and affiliated trusts. And it was started in the 1970s with a $200 pass the hat donation from a small board of directors that formed at Midwest Research Institute. Today, our community foundation is the third largest I believe, one of the top 5 in the country, definitely.
Wow.
We have assets in 2021 reported by the Community Foundation of $5.5 billion. They took in 2021, they reported that they took in $1.2 billion. That's $1.2 billion donors gave to the Community Foundation. And then those donors pushed out nearly $800 million of donations to nonprofits, just like we have in our community, Children's Mercy Hospital, University of Missouri, the Symphony, Wayside Waifs, the Nature Conservancy, organizations that are really community-based. So there are opportunities. Now, how do you find a donor advised fund? Because, they have the protection of not being as transparent as a foundation. All foundations must, if you have a private foundation, you must file a 990 each year if you have a certain amount of income. And I found a donor advised fund, since they have protection of the community foundation or a commercial organization that they would be part of, like Bank of America, Charles Schwab, Fidelity. They don't have to necessarily, though they don't have to report individually, they report aggregately. So in our community foundation here in Greater Kansas City, there are over 7,000 donor advised funds that donors have set up. I set one up at Jan Kramer, our former president and CEO of our community foundation here. At her suggestion, I set one up for my business nearly 20 years ago. And I have actively used that to make donations through my business and personally as well over that period of time. I think nonprofits feel that they don't know really how to identify donor advised funds. So here's a few areas that I think would be helpful of identifying and what you need to do to create awareness. Number one, you need to survey your donor base. You need to create a survey. Send out a survey and include on there, do you have a donor advised fund? And if so, please let us know and we will help to follow up with you. I think you've got to also ask your board members who they know in key relationships as well. I think you have to create on your on your giving page an option of giving through your donor advised fund. As you say about cash, check, credit card, donor advised fund would be a checkoff area that you want to make sure that you are putting together as well. Sometimes we get donations, a nonprofit, through a DAF that is anonymous. And the donor has decided that he or she does not want to be known, and they have the recipient organization send a donation in an anonymous way. That makes directors of development crazy.
Crazy.
We have been involved in a few campaigns for two organizations the last few years. They got six-figure donations that came out of the clear blue from someone who knew about a capital campaign that we were involved in. It made our executive director or CEO just mad that he did not know who that donor was. Well, what we have to do is we have to go back to the community, to the foundation, or to the organization that sent us the gift, and we have to thank them. We also say that we need to provide some materials that we hope that you will pass along to the donor on our behalf. That these is our thank you and our materials that they can utilize. Also, when an organization does know who the donor advised fund donor is, make sure you're not writing the thank you letter to the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation, because they're just the conduit for that donation. It was the Jeffrey Byrne donor advised fund that made the donation. Therefore, Jeffrey Byrne should be getting, or Ruth Biggis should be getting the thank you letter and the receipt. So, I think there are ways that you got to go out and dig. You have to dig a little more when you're thinking about donor advised funds. But with 8% of overall giving coming from donor advised funds, that's probably, what is that, Ruth? Maybe $50 to $80 million.
It's a lot. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. So,
as long as we're talking about donor advised funds as another checkoff place, on your giving page, it seems like there's other ways even that have developed or maybe have become more front and center. For example, digital wallets, being able to pay a gift through your digital wallet. Who thought that, 20 years ago, who would have thought? And then I had read too, crowdfunding and e-commerce stores putting out maybe your own swag to sell. What are you hearing out there about these kinds of things? And I even heard one about gaming for good. I don't know if you've heard about that. All these people who are gamers, when they get online, apparently you can add a donate button to your page, whatever. That shows you how non-gaming I am. But the point being is, maybe that's something to look at. And that's also a lot of young people, but not just young people.
I think there's many ways to put out a message as there is the imagination. However, I think that you have to think through, if you're going to put out there a option to give through an electronic wallet, or you're going to start a crowdfunding campaign, do you have the infrastructure to receive those gifts, to properly account for those gifts, properly make sure that those are designated for the cause that it was solicited for, so you're not misusing donor data. What type of donor data are you getting from that option to give as well? Are you getting a full platform of donor name, address, and the specific amount? Are you getting their email, their telephone number, their cell number? Exactly what are you getting? Text to give. When organizations do text to give, many times donations under a certain threshold, you don't know exactly who the donor is. You're just getting a telephone number associated with a gift that's being processed by whatever processor you're using. So I think that you have to really be cautious and make sure that you are understanding the different usages and how you're going to log those in and how you're going to utilize those for repeat solicitation as well. And, that's all what we want to do is once we get a donation, we want to make sure that the donation is properly recognized. And then we want to go back out and solicit the donor for another gift. So I think with many of these creative and new ideas, you have to really think through those and make sure that you are accounting for those in a proper way, Ruth.
We just have a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to be sure to ask you what about the virtual solicitation? Is that something people should be using, or are there just limited ways?
Are you talking about virtual solicitation like we're doing right now, having a conversation over the internet? Correct.
Let's say you live in New York or wherever. So should you do that? And if so, what are the situations where, it's okay to do it?
During COVID, I was doing solicitations with nonprofits, and my largest solicitation I did during the COVID 12-month period where donors really did not want to be seen in person. Largest donation that we solicited was for $25 million. So that would be something that, 3+ years ago, I would have said you're frickin' crazy to even think about doing that. I think today that you are returning to the tried and true methods of doing that. So I don't think that is appropriate now. I do think it's very appropriate to use technology and virtual tools to cultivate your donors, maybe to pop them on and provide them with an exciting update that you might have, you can do much better at your office with an attractive background that you can do a 10-minute call with versus a, 45-minute visit, 30 minutes to get there, 30 minutes to get home, or sometimes even days to get back and forth. So I think that, you have to really judge what you feel is the appropriate way of soliciting and reaching out to your donor. But I certainly think that the donors are very used to technology, to Zoom, to Microsoft Teams, other forms. Make sure that as you are using the technology, that your donor is able to access that technology. Because there's nothing more frustrating for your donor is if you send a link and they can't get on the link and they futz around for 5 or 10 minutes. And then, you are expecting them to pop up. They don't, they get frustrated, you're frustrated, and it just doesn't work. So, as someone told me many years ago, whatever technology you use, Jeffrey, it's your fault if it doesn't work. So your fault.
Check. That's right. Check the tech.
That's right. That's right.
Jeffrey, thank you as always. I want to make sure to let our audience know Jeffrey and I did a wonderful podcast too about the art of the ask, which you can just pop on our website and check that out along with all these trends. So you can take that further step, and that's at www.kccaresonline.org. Thank you again, Dr. Philanthropy.
Great. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you for joining us for Casey Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications, also a nonprofit. This Casey Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. If you'd like to be a guest or you want to provide underwriting opportunities for Casey Cares, visit our website, kccaresonline.org, and spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at Casey Cares Radio and on Instagram at Casey Cares Online. Don't forget, you can catch us Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 a.m. and 94.5 FM. Thank you for joining us on Casey Cares.